Welcome to Native America. Before European colonizers came to what would become the United States, there were hundreds of vibrant nations of native peoples. These included the Navajo, the Lakota, the Apache, the Cherokee, and many, many others. Some nations built large cities while others roamed the countryside in small bands. Some cultivated crops like corn and squash, while others hunted buffalo across the Great Plains. Each nation had its own language, spirituality, and art. Life was hard, but there was beauty everywhere. There were roaring waterfalls, dense forests, endless prairies, and mountains that reached up to touch the sky. Generations of people had lived in harmony with the land for thousands of years. Then one day, the wind shifted and everything changed. Across the Atlantic Ocean, three European nations, the British, the French, and the Spanish, dreamed of a new world. For centuries, they had carved out colonial empires in the Caribbean and Central America, seizing land and resources from the indigenous people there. Now their sights were set on North America, a vast, untamed wilderness brimming with possibilities. The first Europeans to make their way to present-day America were explorers and missionaries. They sailed up the St. Lawrence River, followed animal trails deep into the woods, and walked among native villages, eager to forge alliances and spread Christianity. At first, trade flourished. Europeans sought furs and food from the natives, while Native Americans eagerly traded for metal tools and firearms. However, as more Europeans arrived, the newcomers' true intentions became clear. They wanted the land for themselves. A clash of cultures ensued, a collision between two worlds. The Europeans brought with them diseases that devastated native populations who had no immunity to them. As the newcomers pushed further inland, conflicts over land and resources grew more intense, and so began a dark chapter in history. In the 16th century, the Spanish began a brutal campaign to conquer and control the Southwest. With soldiers and priests in tow, they marched across tribal lands, subjugating entire villages and forcing many to convert to Christianity. Meanwhile, the French explored the Mississippi Valley and the Great Lakes region. They established trading posts and recruited native allies in their ongoing battles with the British for territorial supremacy. The fur trade became a key part of the colonial economy, and it led to an increased demand for land, which caused even more clashes. The United States would eventually gain independence from the British, but this newfound freedom did not extend to Native Americans. Throughout the colonial era, the U.S. government employed a strategy of cultural erasure. The ideal was to assimilate indigenous people into white society by stripping them of their traditions and languages. The first step in this process was often a trip to a boarding school. Overcrowded dormitories, harsh punishments, and long hours were standard. In these schools, native children were forbidden to speak their native languages. If caught doing so, they were often beaten or locked up. Teachers punished them for speaking their native languages. They punished them for praying to their gods, and they punished them for celebrating their cultures. Across the country, on the East Coast and the West Coast, the U.S. government relocated Native Americans to reservations, forcibly taking their land. When President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, thousands of Native Americans were removed from their homelands. This became known as the Trail of Tears. It was called this because so many people died along the way. As time went on, Native Americans kept getting pushed further and further west. Eventually, most of the tribes were located west of the Mississippi River. The U.S. government made treaties with the tribes, promising to protect their land and way of life. But again and again, the federal government broke these treaties. Settlers encroached on native lands, gold was discovered on reservations, and U.S. military forces often sided with the settlers, not the tribes. Today, many Americans know about the Trail of Tears and other forced relocations, but few realize just how recently this occurred. The last official relocation happened only 70 years ago. In 1956, the U.S. government forced the tribe of 10,000 Native Americans to leave their land in Oklahoma and move to a tiny reservation. They are still there today. In the early 1900s, the U.S. government created a new plan to remove Native Americans from their lands. This plan was called the Dawes Act. Under this plan, Native American men could become U.S. citizens if they gave up their tribal affiliation and took up farming. Many Native Americans agreed to these terms because they wanted access to education and economic opportunities that were denied to them under the previous policies. However, most were not prepared for the challenges of modern farming, and they lost their land to white settlers. By the 1930s, the U.S. government had successfully removed most Native Americans from their lands. But this did not bring about the end of their cultures. Despite facing assimilationist policies and the loss of their lands, Native Americans have managed to preserve their cultures, languages, and traditions. Today, many Native Americans are working to revitalize their languages and cultures. They are also fighting for recognition of their sovereignty and human rights. It is important to understand the history of Native Americans because it is a history of resilience. Despite all that they have endured, Native Americans continue to thrive. Their cultures continue to grow, and their voices continue to be heard. When I was researching this topic, I came across a lot of stories about Native Americans who fought back against the U.S. government. These stories were inspiring. One story that stuck with me was the story of Sacagawea. She was a Native American woman who helped the Lewis and Clark expedition explore the Pacific Northwest. When she was 12 years old, her village was attacked and she was taken captive. However, when the U.S. Army found her, she refused to accept their offer of freedom. Instead, she chose to stay with the tribe that had captured her. She became a valuable member of the tribe and helped them survive during the winter months. When Lewis and Clark heard that she was with the tribe, they asked her to come with them on their expedition. She agreed and became one of the most important members of the group. She helped them navigate the river and served as an interpreter. Without her help, it is unlikely that the expedition would have been successful. Another story that I found inspiring was the story of Geronimo. He was a leader of the Apache people who fought against the U.S. Army for years. He was eventually captured and sent to a prison in Alabama. However, he never gave up hope. He escaped several times and continued to fight for his people. Eventually, he was pardoned by President Teddy Roosevelt and allowed to return to Oklahoma. He spent his last years there and is now considered a hero to many Native Americans. When I was learning about the Trail of Tears, I felt sadness and anger. The Trail of Tears was a terrible event in history. It is sad that so many Native Americans died on this journey. It makes me angry that the U.S. government would do this to its own citizens. I hope that we can learn from this terrible event and work to make sure that it never happens again. I feel hopeful for the future of Native Americans. They have been through so much, but they continue to thrive. Their cultures continue to grow, and their voices continue to be heard. I am proud to be a Native American, and I hope that everyone will take the time to learn about my culture and history. Now let's go back to the beginning. Imagine a vast land carved by sacred rivers and lit by ceremonial fires, dense forests, endless prairies, mountains revered by generations. This was the ancestral territory of Native peoples before colonization. Centuries of culture, spirituality, and ancient wisdom thrived here. And then silence arrived, silence imposed by laws, by weapons, by broken treaties. But the voices didn't vanish, they waited, and now they will be heard. Chapter 2. Roots of Conflict. The land was sacred, not owned but shared. To Native peoples, it was a living relative, not a commodity. But to the colonizers, it was territory to be claimed, mapped, and divided. And so began the conflict, not just of borders, but of world views. Hello and welcome to this course. This is Chapter 2. Before we start, I want to say that throughout this course, when I refer to Native peoples, I'm talking about hundreds of distinct cultures, languages, and nations. Because despite what the colonizers did to us, We are not a monolith. We have always been many, and we continue to be many. Now let's get into this chapter. The year is 1803. The place is the mouth of the Columbia River, somewhere between here and here. And the people are the Chinook, who have lived here for thousands of years. Their village sits right along the river, and the tribe has thrived on the salmon that run through the Columbia every year. That is, until today, because today is different. Today, explorers from the East Coast have made it out west, and they're claiming this land for the United States. The Chinook will be forcibly removed from their home in less than 100 years. This map, known as the Louisiana Purchase, will grow exponentially in size, consuming all of the Chinook tribal lands and more. And the United States will continue to grow until it reaches both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But how did this happen? How could one nation consume so much land from so many different tribes and nations? Well, first, there was the idea of manifest destiny. All across the eastern states, the idea of manifest destiny was taking hold. The phrase itself was coined in 1845, but the idea had been brewing since before European Americans set foot in North America. Manifest destiny was the belief that the U.S. was destined to expand from coast to coast. This idea encouraged Americans to move west and claim land for themselves. They truly believed it was their God-given right to take land from the many diverse native nations that already called this land home. And so they did just that. As the United States grew, it did so by violently removing tribes from their ancestral homelands. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act, which allowed for the forced relocation of native tribes from the Southeast. The president literally signed the death warrant for many tribes. The 5 civilized tribes, as they were called, were forced from their homelands and marched across the United States to new reservations west of the Mississippi River. During this journey, thousands of Native Americans died of starvation and disease. The Cherokee, one of the 5 civilized tribes, lost 1 out of every 4 people during the forced relocation. Imagine your family and friends being rounded up and marched across the country to an unfamiliar location. Imagine watching them die of starvation and disease. Imagine watching your culture nearly die with them. That's what happened to the native peoples of the United States, and that's what the United States did to native peoples. Here's an example of one of the many treaties that the United States government broke. On January 19, 1826, William Clark, an Indian agent for the U.S., met with chiefs from several different nations to discuss trading rights through their territories. After 3 days of discussion and debate, the 2 parties signed the Treaty of Wailaki, which would allow American traders to travel through the lands of the Nez Perce, the Umatilla, the Walla Walla, and the Cayuse without incident. However, after signing the treaty, American settlers continued to encroach upon tribal lands. By 1855, gold had been discovered in the area, and settlers poured into the region, forcing the tribes to give up more and more of their land until finally, the U.S. government sent in troops to force the tribes to move to reservations. For many tribes, the idea of owning land was completely foreign. For thousands of years, they had lived on the land, yes, but the idea of owning it didn't make sense. Most tribes were nomadic, following the buffalo herds or the salmon runs. Some tribes, like the Pueblo, lived in one place but didn't own it. Rather, they were caretakers of it. They understood that the land was a gift from the Creator and that they were only allowed to use what they needed. Colonizers could not wrap their minds around this way of thinking. To them, if the natives weren't farming the land or using it for some sort of profit, then they were wasting it. In fact, the colonizers took the concept of ownership so far that they invented the word squatter to describe Native Americans who lived on land without documentation. When colonizers found squatters, they either forced them off the land or killed them. And if they were able to successfully kick the natives off their land, they would then claim it for themselves. The U.S. government also employed spies to infiltrate tribes, listening to their meetings and reporting back to the government on what the tribes were planning. For example, the U.S. government paid Jedediah Smith to spy on the tribes and report back on their activities. Smith's reports were used to justify the removal of several tribes from their lands. Sometimes the U.S. government would offer native tribes money to leave their lands, but the amount of money offered was never enough to compensate the tribes for the value of the land. Additionally, most of these deals were made behind closed doors with a few tribal leaders, and the vast majority of the tribal members were not consulted or compensated. It seemed like every time a tribe signed a treaty with the U.S. government, the next one was right around the corner, which meant that the tribe had to constantly be on guard for trickery. Here's a letter from Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce to President Theodore Roosevelt, asking him to uphold the terms of a previous treaty. In it, Chief Joseph explains that his people have always kept their end of the bargain, but he questions whether the United States can do the same. He then goes on to ask President Roosevelt to uphold the treaty, warning him that if the U.S. breaks the treaty, the Nez Perce will be forced to fight. Unfortunately for the Nez Perce and many other tribes, the U.S. government would break its treaties and force the tribes to relocate to smaller reservations. As the United States grew, it did so at the expense of Native American lives. Thousands of acres of tribal land were stolen. Thousands of Native Americans were forced to relocate, and thousands more were killed by disease and starvation. But Native leaders were not going to stand by and watch their people be slaughtered. So they fought back. Leaders such as Tecumseh, Red Cloud, and Osceola led their people in armed conflicts against the United States military. The United States Army spent hundreds of millions of dollars fighting Native Americans and killing hundreds of Native American men, women, and children. In fact, it cost the United States $2 million to fight the Black Hawk War, which resulted in the deaths of more than 1,500 Native Americans. But the U.S. government did not stop. They continued to fight Native Americans until they were too weak to resist. While some tribes fought back militarily, others fought back spiritually. Ceremonies and dances like the ghost dance were a way for tribes to connect with their ancestors and find strength in their heritage. Even though these dances may seem like simple social gatherings, to those who participated in them, they were a powerful tool for resistance. Through these dances, Native Americans were able to express their culture and identity, which was under constant attack from the U.S. government. These dances were also a way to honor the ancestors who had been killed or forced to relocate. By dancing, Native Americans could feel connected to their ancestors and the land they had lost. One of the most famous examples of spiritual resistance is the ghost dance, which was a ceremonial dance that was performed by various Native American tribes in the late 19th century. The dance was a way for tribes to connect with their ancestors and find strength in their heritage. Many tribes participated in the ghost dance, including the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. The dance was led by a man named Wovoka, who claimed to have received a message from the Creator that the buffalo would return and the white man would disappear. This prophecy gave the dance a political undertone, as many Native Americans saw the return of the buffalo and the disappearance of the white man as a way to reclaim their lost lands and way of life. The U.S. government saw the dance as a threat and attempted to suppress it. This led to the Wounded Knee massacre in 1890, when U.S. soldiers killed more than 200 Native Americans who were participating in the ghost dance. Despite all of this resistance, the United States continued to push Native Americans off their lands. The tribes that hadn't been removed yet were forced onto reservations. The U.S. government then took the remaining land and sold it to settlers for cheap, or gave it away to railroads to help encourage their expansion. So why does any of this matter? Why should you care about what happened to Native Americans all those years ago? Well, the answer is simple. What happened to Native Americans did not happen all those years ago. It's happening right now. Every time you turn on the news, you hear about another pipeline being built through sacred tribal lands or another sacred site being desecrated by vandals. Every time you see a politician talking about states' rights, Remember that the state of Oklahoma was literally created to be a prison for Native Americans. Every time you see a Native American activist speaking about their rights, remember that the United States government has been violating their rights since before the United States was even a country. The history of the United States is deeply intertwined with the history of Native Americans, and it's time we tell the truth about that history. So what will you do with that knowledge? Will you ignore it, or will you use it to make a difference? In the next chapter, we'll see what happens when diplomacy fails. Families torn from their homes, children walking through snow. The Trail of Tears was not just a path, it was a wound carved into the land, and it's time we walk it together. Click here to keep learning. Chapter 3, Trail of Tears, The Walk of Sorrow. It began with a knock, then a command. Families were told to leave, now. No time to gather belongings, no time to say goodbye. What followed was not a journey, it was a forced march, a trail carved by grief, by hunger, by death. This was the Trail of Tears. We begin this story with a warning. The events we're about to describe are difficult to talk about, even harder to hear. Before we go further, please take a moment to click on the resources that we have provided. If something in this video affects you or someone you know, there is help available. Imagine your home. Maybe it's where you grew up, where your parents raised you, where you made memories with family and friends. Now imagine soldiers arriving at your door, telling you to leave, to abandon everything behind. You're given only moments to decide. Your bags are already packed. You don't need to choose what to bring because you can't bring anything. You leave empty-handed. That's what happened here. Homes were emptied in a matter of hours. Entire communities were forced to walk away from their ancestral lands, from the graves of their ancestors. In the early 1800s, thousands of Native Americans from 5 tribes were living in the southeastern United States. For generations, they had built homes, raised families, created businesses. They farmed the land, hunted its game, and fished its waters. This was their home. But white settlers wanted what the Native Americans had. President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act into law. It gave him the power to take Native American lands and force them to move west. The U.S. Army was in charge of making sure that everyone moved. So soldiers went door to door, telling Native Americans to leave immediately. They were marched away from their homes, never to return. It was brutal, and it was cold. It was winter, and many people were not prepared for such a long journey in the cold. There wasn't enough food, and what little there was quickly ran out. Those who couldn't keep up with the group were left to die. Disease spread, and people got sick. For weeks, people walked barefoot, wrapped in thin cloth, trying to stay warm in the cold weather. As they walked, they buried their loved ones. Over 15,000 people are thought to have died during the forced marches. Many never saw the new territory where they were supposed to live. The oldest members of the community suffered the most. Some collapsed and died. Children also suffered. Not all of those who started the march made it to the end. Some died and were buried along the way. One survivor said that she carried her sister until her legs gave out. She placed her sister on the ground and rolled over a log to hide her body. The little sister had become too weak to walk. No one could carry the burden alone. They had to help each other. But there wasn't much anyone could do when the cold set in. The snow didn't care who we were. It covered our tears just the same. The snow, the cold, the hunger, the sadness, it all blends together in memory. Each day is the same as the last, except for the faces around you. At first, there are lots of faces, but as the days pass, some faces fade away. Soon you are walking alone. But even though it was impossible to stay warm in the cold, people found ways to hold on to their culture. They sang songs, but they sang them quietly so the soldiers wouldn't hear. They kept their voices low so they could remember who they were, where they came from. When they stopped for the night, they huddled together for warmth. And when it was quiet, They shared stories of the old days, before the forced marches, before they lost everything. They talked about the places they missed, the family they left behind, and the lives they could no longer live. While they were walking, people hid sacred items, buried them in the ground. They placed prayer stones and feathers in the dirt. Sometimes they whispered chants so the spirits could hear them. Even as our bodies broke, our spirit walked beside us. Then finally, after months of walking, people started to see the end of the journey. They weren't looking forward to a new life, but at least the walking was ending. When they arrived in the new territory, nothing was familiar. The land was different. The trees were different. The animals were different. Even the sky seemed to be a different color. Everything was strange and frightening, but still they pushed on. They found some place to camp and they stayed. This is where their new lives began. It was not the life they once lived. It was not the life they dreamed of. It was a life filled with sorrow, with loss, with the memory of what they left behind. They rebuilt their lives and tried to make a future here, but they never forgot what happened on the Trail of Tears. They passed down stories, songs, and experiences through generations. They kept their traditions alive, even if they had to whisper them in the night. They resisted the rules of the U.S. government whenever they could. And when that wasn't enough, they fought back. They fought for their land, for their identity, for their very survival. But the fight was not easy and the results were devastating. What came next was not peace. It was a new chapter of struggle, one that would lead to Wounded Knee. As we conclude this chapter of Native American history, let us reflect on the profound impact of these events. The Trail of Tears stands as a tragic testament to the resilience and endurance of Native American communities in the face of immense adversity. Their forced removal from their ancestral lands resulted in immeasurable suffering, including the loss of thousands of lives. The survivors carried the emotional and psychological scars of this traumatic experience for generations. However, amidst this dark chapter, we find glimmers of hope and strength. The Native Americans' unwavering commitment to their cultural traditions, including their songs, stories, and spiritual practices, served as a lifeline, connecting them to their heritage and identity. Their determination to preserve their culture in the face of assimilationist policies is truly inspiring. Furthermore, the courage and leadership displayed by individuals like Principal Chief John Ross and others who advocated for their rights and resisted oppression should be celebrated. Their efforts laid the groundwork for future generations to continue the fight for justice and equality. As we move forward, it is crucial to acknowledge and learn from this painful history. By understanding the Trail of Tears and the subsequent events leading to Wounded Knee, we can work towards a more inclusive and compassionate future. Let us honor the resilience of Native American communities by amplifying their voices, supporting their self-determination, and celebrating their vibrant cultures. May the legacy of the Trail of Tears serve as a reminder of the importance of protecting human rights, preserving cultural diversity, and seeking truth and reconciliation. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking it and sharing it with others. If you want to watch more videos like this, subscribe to our channel. And if you want to support our work, you can donate through the link in the description below. Thank you for watching and let us know what you think. Until next time, Chapter 4, Resistance and Hope. They tried to erase our story, but they didn't know it was carved into stone, sung in chants, danced in circles, and whispered in names that never fade. Native resistance wasn't just built on weapons. It was built on memory, faith, and courage. For some tribes, warriors like Tecumseh rose up. For others, spiritual leaders carried on ancient traditions. And everywhere, stories and songs kept the culture alive. This is part 4 of our series, where we explore how indigenous nations resisted removal from their homelands. Hey everyone! Welcome back. This series is brought to you with support from a production company. They are a team of indigenous filmmakers dedicated to sharing authentic Native stories. Be sure to check out their channel. They have some amazing documentaries and series. Now let's dive into this episode. Leaders who rose up. Tecumseh was a Shawnee chief who dreamed of an alliance between tribes from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. In the early 1800s, he traveled thousands of miles, uniting natives against the U.S. government. At the Battle of Tippecanoe, his forces fought against U.S. troops, led by an up-and-coming general named William Henry Harrison. Though the Native Americans were outnumbered, they almost won. But Harrison survived and went on to become president. Tecumseh continued to resist until he was killed in battle in 1813. On the other side of the continent, Red Cloud was uniting tribes in the west. After years of preparation, his forces ambushed U.S. soldiers at the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876. Also known as Custer's Last Stand, the victory gave Native Americans hope for more wins against the U.S. Army. But the following year, the U.S. government retaliated. Red Cloud and his people had to flee to Canada, where he lived out the rest of his life. In the Southwest, the Apache warrior Geronimo resisted for decades. Like Red Cloud, he too was forced to flee to Mexico. He turned to the Mexican government for help, but they abandoned him. He surrendered to the U.S. Army in 1886 and spent his last years on a reservation in Oklahoma. He died believing that one day his people would return to their homelands. These weren't the only leaders who rose up. Some names you might recognize: Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, Chief Joseph, all resisted the U.S. government's attempts to remove them from their land. All wanted freedom for their people. They fought for it with everything they had. But no matter the outcome of any battle, they refused to give up their identity. The power of spirituality. In the early 1900s, a young man named John Burgabung with the Kiowa tribe in Oklahoma. His grandmother had been a captive of the Comanches, and he grew up hearing stories about their culture and history. When he was 18, he participated in a sacred ceremony for the first time. He later wrote about it. It was a world I knew existed, but had never seen. A living part of my heritage, which reached back into the remote past. We could trace its beginnings, if we wished, through the centuries before written history, before even the memory of migrations and wars. For many tribes, ceremonies were more than just ritual. They were a way to maintain culture and connection to the land. Some ceremonies were public, but others were held in secret to protect them from harm. One example is the ghost dance. It began in the 1800s as a way to bring about a new way of life. As U.S. soldiers approached, dancers would pretend to be possessed by spirits. No weapon or force could stop them. It was a message of hope and a way to reconnect with ancestors whose spirits were said to watch over them. One night, soldiers came to break up a ghost dance ceremony. They opened fire on the crowd. It became known as the Wounded Knee Massacre. It was the last major incident in what is called the Indian Wars. There would be violence again, but it wouldn't be for decades. But it's important to remember that Native people didn't just respond to violence with violence. Many also found strength in their spirituality. As John wrote, "I believe that the Great Spirit was trying to teach us that we must not fight the white man as he is too strong, but we must do something to save our people. We must keep our dances and our ceremonies alive." Oral tradition. As shield as U.S. settlers moved west, they established schools to assimilate indigenous children into American society. At these boarding schools, kids were forbidden to speak their native languages. They were punished if they were caught speaking in any indigenous language. But even without speaking, stories and songs still carried messages. Back in their communities, elders taught children about their culture and history. In the evenings around the campfire, they would tell stories about bravery and survival. These stories were passed down for generations and helped keep cultural knowledge alive during difficult times. One Ojibwe elder recalled sitting by the fire listening to her grandmother tell stories about the Thunderbird. She explained that the Thunderbird was a powerful being that controlled the weather and protected the people. Even if they couldn't speak the language openly, the stories sustained them. Many indigenous languages were almost lost because of the boarding schools. But today, there is a movement to revitalize them. On reservations and in urban areas, Native languages are being taught in classrooms and at cultural events. The spoken word became their library. And our weapon, says one activist. Our language is the key to our identity. Without it, we lose a part of ourselves. Art, music, and identity. When faced with assimilation policies, some people express themselves through art. Painters like T.C. Cannon used their talents to show native life in a positive light. They painted portraits of tribal members, landscapes of their homelands, and scenes from their daily lives. This art showed the world that Indigenous people were not just survivors, they were thriving. Other artists used beadwork, jewelry making, and other crafts to share their culture. Some made dream catchers, others created intricate bead patterns. Each piece told the story of a people. Then there was the music. With guitars, drums, and violins, native musicians sang about their history and culture. Songs were written in English, Spanish, and Indigenous languages. They blended genres like blues, rock, and country with traditional chants and rhythms. And everywhere, stories and songs kept the soul alive. When Indigenous people were removed from their homelands, they took their creativity with them. Artists like Sherman Chattelstone and Jackson Pole Takipisi, singers like Buffy St. Marie and Robbie Robertson, and writers like Leslie Marmon Silko and Louise Erdrich have shared native stories with the world. Their work has helped break stereotypes and promote understanding. But as we move into the next chapter, things will take a dark turn. The next chapter will reveal the moment when faith became a target and tragedy returned at Wounded Knee. Before we get there, though, I want to say thank you. Thank you for watching, thank you for learning, and thank you for caring. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories. Next time on our series, we will continue our exploration of how Native people have resisted removal from their homelands. The series is brought to you with support from a production company. They are a team of Indigenous filmmakers dedicated to sharing authentic Native stories. Be sure to check out their channel. They have some amazing documentaries and series. All the resources used are added in the description below. And remember, stay curious. Chapter 5. The Wounded Knee Massacre. It was December 1890. The cold pierced the skin, but fear ran deeper. The Lakota were surrounded, unarmed, exhausted. The U.S. Army watched with suspicion. One shot was fired, and what followed was not a battle, it was a massacre. An assault on a people who had already lost nearly everything except their faith. I'm your host, and this is our series. Now let's go back to the time when the Great Sioux Nation was on the brink of annihilation. After years of relentless attacks by the U.S. military, their way of life shattered, and driven by desperation, they found solace in the ghost dance movement. This new religion offered hope for a better future, a chance to turn back the clock and restore what was lost. But the government saw it as a threat, a last stand against an unrelenting enemy. So let's tell the story of that day in 1890 when hope danced with despair. In the bleak winter of 1890, the ghost dance movement was sweeping through the Great Plains, uniting Native Americans in a desperate bid for survival and cultural revival. This spiritual and political uprising gave voice to the voiceless, offering a glimpse of hope in a darkening world. The Lakota Sioux, after enduring years of hardship and displacement, found solace in its promise of a return to their ancestral lands and a renewal of their traditions. As the dance spread, so did the fervor, attracting thousands of Native Americans from various tribes who yearned for a better future. The U.S. government saw this growing movement as a potential threat, a last-ditch effort to defy their authority and preserve their way of life. Fearful of an armed rebellion, the government took swift and decisive action to crush the ghost dance, viewing it as a challenge to its dominance and a disruption to the forced assimilation policies that aimed to eradicate Native American cultures. Tensions mounted as the U.S. Army, led by the 7th Cavalry, set out to locate and disperse the dancers. Their journey took them to the banks of Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota, where they encountered the Lakota Sioux camped and waiting for a delegation to negotiate terms for their surrender. The Army's presence sent shockwaves through the encampment, turning the hopes for peaceful negotiations into despair, as the Native Americans realized they were trapped in a web of deceit. The soldiers surrounded them, their faces grim, their weapons loaded, ready to put an end to the ghost dance. Machine guns pointed like accusing fingers, denying any chance of escape. Despite the danger, the Lakota remained steadfast, their voices rising in song, their spirits unbroken. They sang songs of resilience, their voices echoing the pain of their history and the hope for a brighter future. Even in the face of impending doom, their voices soared, refusing to be silenced. As the night deepened, the air grew heavy with tension. Trust had withered away, replaced by a deep-rooted mistrust. Each passing moment stretched into an eternity. Then, amidst the chilling silence, a gunshot shattered the tense calm. The innocent sound of a hunting bird or a curious soldier's aim. No one knows for sure. But what followed was pure carnage. Chaos erupted as the Lakota fled, running blindly in terror. The soldiers opened fire, their guns blazing, sending bullets whizzing through the air like deadly hail. The once hopeful voices were cut short, replaced by screams of pain and terror. Women and children stumbled, falling victim to the relentless assault. The ground beneath their feet soaked in blood, staining the earth a deep crimson red. Those who fell were too many to count, their bodies riddled with bullets, their dreams extinguished. In the midst of this horror, a mother cradled her child close, shielding them with her own body, a desperate attempt to protect innocence. But even in her embrace, the child's life ebbed away, their tiny body succumbing to the violence that knew no mercy. As the shooting subsided, a somber silence descended upon the scene. The soldiers, their guns still smoking, stood amidst the carnage, their faces grim, their actions sealing their fate as instruments of brutality. In that moment, the weight of their actions settled upon them, heavy and inescapable. And then there were others who fell, warriors and elders alike, their bodies strewn across the ground, their stories silenced forever. Some collapsed with rifles in hand, their last moments a testament to their courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Among them was Chief Bigfoot, his life cut short, his leadership and wisdom silenced by the very force that sought to extinguish the flame of the Lakota spirit. When the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded, the true extent of the tragedy unfolded. Over 200 Native people lay dead, their bodies forming a heartbreaking mosaic of lives cut short. The massacre at Wounded Knee was not just a tragic incident. It was a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty, a dark stain on the annals of history. The Native Americans who perished that day were not just casualties of a violent conflict. They were individuals with hopes, dreams, and stories that deserved to be remembered. Among the victims, women and children accounted for a significant portion of the casualties, their innocence shattered by the indiscriminate gunfire. The massacre sent shockwaves that resonated far beyond the banks of Wounded Knee. It became a symbol of the brutal realities of westward expansion and the cost of dispossession. The aftermath of the massacre was marked by a profound sense of loss and grief. Mass graves were hastily dug, and the bodies of the fallen were laid to rest, their individual identities often forgotten or ignored. Survivors were left to grapple with the trauma of that day, the haunting memories becoming a shared burden across generations. The story of Wounded Knee isn't just a historical footnote. It's a painful chapter that continues to shape Native American identity and activism. The events of that day serve as a reminder of the resilience of the Native American spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. Despite the physical and emotional scars left behind, the Native American community has shown remarkable strength in preserving their culture and traditions. Through storytelling, art, and activism, they have kept the memory of Wounded Knee alive, ensuring that the voices of the voiceless are heard. The legacy of Wounded Knee continues to resonate today, serving as a catalyst for conversations about historical trauma, systemic injustice, and the importance of remembering and acknowledging the darkest chapters of our past. It stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable tragedy. As we reflect on this somber event, let us remember those who perished at Wounded Knee, not just as statistics, but as individuals whose lives were tragically cut short. Their stories deserve to be told, their memories honored, and their contributions to their communities acknowledged. Let their stories be a call to action, urging us to confront the realities of our history and work towards a future that embraces empathy, understanding, and justice for all. We've come to the end of another chapter in our series. If you've been moved by the story of the Great Sioux Nation and want to learn more about their journey, we invite you to check out additional resources. These resources will provide further insights into the resilience, culture, and history of the Native Americans. But now it's time to look ahead to the next chapter in our series, which explores how the pain of the past became a legacy that shaped generations. Tune in next time and continue to follow our channel for more journeys through history. Chapter 6: The Legacy of Pain. The pain didn't end at Wounded Knee. It crossed generations, settled into memories, songs, and the eyes of descendants. But that pain didn't paralyze. It became legacy, a call to remember, resist, and rebuild. Segment 1: Inherited Pain. For 7 generations, my family has carried an untold story, one that lives in the silence between the laughter, in the shadows that linger despite the sunshine. The grief of loss, the ache of exclusion, they're not just memories, they're inherited pain. My grandmother cried when she heard drums. She said the sound brought back memories time couldn't erase. The U.S. government might have taken our land, but it couldn't take our spirit. And that spirit lives on through our elders, our knowledge holders, and in our blood. Segment 2: Memory as Resistance. They took our children from us, but we held on to our culture. We made museums and memorials. We created sacred spaces to honor those who fell, those who resisted, those who dreamed of a better day. Every sunrise, every eagle feather, every drumbeat is a ceremony, every hand drum a heartbeat, every chant a prayer for our ancestors, every ribbon a memory that won't fade, every candle lit is a story refusing to die. Segment 3: Education and Reconnection. Indigenous schools weren't just about teaching reading and writing. They were about teaching culture, language, and most importantly, identity. We opened cultural centers, language immersion programs, and powwows where kids could reconnect with their roots and feel the pride of belonging. We told stories around campfires so the youth could see that their heritage wasn't just something to be ashamed of, but something to celebrate. They tried to erase our names. Today, we write them with pride. Our grandparents and great-grandparents were warriors. Today, we reclaim that warrior spirit, not with weapons, but with education, language, and cultural programs. Segment 4: Voices that Echo. The voices that rose from Wounded Knee still echo today. There's a new generation of Indigenous artists, activists, and leaders who refuse to be silenced. We use the internet, music, film, and literature to tell our stories, to heal our communities, and to inspire change. When our voices are heard, real change can happen. When our stories are shared, more people understand the true meaning of justice, sovereignty, and respect. Our ancestors fought for this. Our grandparents marched for this. Our parents demanded this. It's our turn now to make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain. In the 1970s, activists began to use the term survival to describe their fight for cultural survival. This term was later shortened to revival, emphasizing the need to revive and maintain their cultures. Today, thousands of indigenous languages are spoken around the world, each one a living testament to a culture that has endured centuries of suppression. We keep our languages alive because they're more than words. They're a way of thinking, a way of being. Museums have become essential in preserving and showcasing indigenous cultures. They're not just repositories of the past, but vibrant spaces where culture comes alive. By educating visitors, these museums challenge stereotypes and misconceptions, fostering understanding and appreciation. The National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., is a place where indigenous voices are amplified and diverse perspectives shape how history is understood. Its exhibits go beyond the typical narratives, celebrating the rich cultures and contributions of indigenous peoples. Our stories are powerful. They have the ability to move people, to challenge perspectives, and to inspire action. By sharing our narratives, we break down stereotypes and misconceptions, fostering empathy and understanding. We're not just survivors or victims of the past. We're storytellers, artists, activists, and leaders shaping the future. When indigenous writers share their experiences and perspectives, they breathe life into characters that challenge stereotypes and humanize individuals often reduced to caricatures. Their stories explore themes of identity, culture, and resilience, offering readers a glimpse into the richness of indigenous life. Music is more than entertainment. It's a cultural heartbeat, a source of healing, and a tool for social change. For indigenous musicians, it's a way to express identity, preserve language, and address social issues. Through their music, they give voice to their communities, bridging cultural divides and inspiring activism. Every song is a story, every beat a heartbeat, every note a prayer, every instrument a storyteller, every concert a community coming together. Music is our medicine. It heals our people, it strengthens our culture, it carries our voices to the world. Filmmaking gives indigenous creators the power to shape their own narratives, breaking free from stereotypes often portrayed in mainstream media. By telling their own stories, they challenge perspectives, foster empathy, and inspire dialogue. Film becomes a tool for cultural preservation, social commentary, and personal expression. Visual arts are a powerful form of cultural expression, allowing indigenous artists to depict their worldviews, stories, and traditions. Through their artwork, they challenge stereotypes, promote cultural pride, and engage viewers in meaningful dialogues. Each brushstroke, carving, or bead is a step towards cultural preservation and self-determination. The resilience and resourcefulness of indigenous women are evident in their economic and political leadership. They've navigated historical challenges, advocating for their rights and uplifting their communities. These women are trailblazers, balancing tradition and progress while ensuring their voices are heard on the global stage. Cultural centers are vital spaces where indigenous communities can practice their traditions, preserve their languages, and connect with their cultural heritage. These centers offer a sense of belonging, continuity, and pride, ensuring that cultural knowledge is passed down to future generations. They stand as symbols of cultural resilience and revitalization. Language revitalization programs are crucial for indigenous communities as they work to preserve and revive their languages. These programs, often led by fluent speakers and community members, use innovative methods to teach indigenous languages, ensuring they remain vibrant and relevant for future generations. Language is more than words. It's a key to cultural survival. As indigenous youth assert their identities, they face ongoing challenges such as discrimination, stereotypes, and limited access to cultural resources. However, they're actively working to overcome these obstacles, demanding recognition, inclusion, and equal opportunities. These youth are the future leaders and cultural ambassadors of their communities, carrying the torch of cultural pride and resilience. We are the descendants of the strong, the survivors of the past. Our ancestors may have been forced to march, but today we walk with our heads held high, carrying the hopes and dreams of our people. We are the embodiment of resilience, the living legacy of our ancestors. This platform was built to amplify indigenous voices and share our stories directly with you. We believe in the power of representation and the importance of giving indigenous creators a space to share their work without censorship or exploitation. Join us in amplifying Indigenous voices. Follow us to stay connected to the stories, voices, and experiences of Indigenous peoples. Together, we can support Indigenous creators and ensure that their narratives reach a wider audience. Your support means more Indigenous stories will be seen, heard, and celebrated. As we reflect on the journey of Indigenous peoples, it's essential to acknowledge the profound impact of the past on the present. From the hardships faced in boarding schools to the enduring strength of cultural identity, each experience contributes to the narrative of resilience and cultural survival. Recognizing this legacy allows us to honor the sacrifices of our ancestors and the ongoing efforts to preserve cultural heritage. The legacy of pain is also the legacy of strength. And now, with new tools and new voices, Native peoples are rediscovering their history and sharing it with the world. In the next chapter, we explore how this rediscovery is transforming the present. This is a pivotal moment in history. As Indigenous communities reclaim their narratives and cultural expressions, they're inspiring a broader movement towards cultural understanding and social change. This momentum is driving a collective awakening, challenging long-held stereotypes and fostering empathy among diverse communities. The stage is set for a new era of cultural pride, self-determination, and mutual respect. Together, we can honor the legacy of our ancestors by continuing to educate ourselves about Indigenous cultures, supporting Indigenous artists and activists, and advocating for policies that promote cultural preservation and social justice. Let us be part of this transformative journey, embracing the wisdom and resilience of Indigenous peoples as we strive to create a more inclusive and compassionate world. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery and reflection. If you found this content valuable, please consider supporting us. Your support empowers us to continue sharing these important stories. Together, we can amplify Indigenous voices and ensure that their narratives continue to inspire dialogue and cultural understanding. Chapter 7. Rediscovering History. For centuries, Native history was told by others, distorted, erased, ignored. But now, Native peoples are reclaiming the narrative. Rediscovering history isn't just about the past, it's about reconnecting with truth, identity, and the future. More than a decade ago, a movement began across Indian country. A new generation of storytellers emerged. They captured their history on audio, video, in print, online. They made sure the record was set straight. Their work broke through. People around the world listened. The time had come to set the record straight. In this movement, elders from across Turtle Island came forward with their memories. They gathered in community with younger generations to share their stories. What they said was recorded, filmed, written down for all to hear. And it started to heal old wounds. These recordings became a lifeline to the past, a map to the present. This oral history project connected Native youth to the wisdom of their elders. For the first time in many generations, young people heard stories of survival, of resistance. They learned about treaties and cultures that had been almost lost. But then something amazing happened. As these stories spread, more and more elders and knowledge holders came forward. Each person added another thread to the fabric of tribal history. Some traveled to other communities to learn about different tribes' histories. As the circle of storytellers grew, so did the circle of listeners. More people found out about the resilience of Native nations, their strength and ingenuity. One elder said, "Before, our history was taught in boarding schools. They tried to erase everything, our language, our culture, our identity. Now our history is being told by those who lived it. It's not in books or papers. It's in the voices that survived." As the oral history movement grew, tribal schools opened their doors. For the first time, children could attend classes in their native languages. They learned songs, stories, and traditions that had been hidden for generations. Teachers rediscovered ancient teachings and shared them with pride. Students embraced their culture and language, knowing that they were carrying on a legacy that had almost been lost. A young student said, "I'm learning the language of my ancestors." I'm learning about the plants, animals, and stories of my tribe. Every recovered word is a bridge to who we were and who we still are. Then came the scholars. Many of them were young, but they brought fresh eyes and open minds to tribal libraries and archives. They went through old documents and artifacts, trying to piece together the story of their people. They uncovered family histories, finding records of births, marriages, and deaths. They learned about treaties and land claims that had been buried for generations. A researcher said, "For too long, our history has been ignored or twisted by outsiders. Now we're taking a stand. We're unearthing the truth about our past so we can build a better future." As the movement grew, it reached beyond the classroom and the archive. People started to use new technology to share their stories with the world. Podcasts and videos popped up online, sharing history, language, and culture. Social media became a platform for telling stories and reaching new audiences. Suddenly, Indigenous creators had a space of their own. They could share their history and culture without filters or censorship. A podcaster said, "What was once silenced is now shared with the world. We're using new tools to keep our languages alive and our stories heard." And everywhere there were storytellers, singers, and artists weaving history into their work. Painters used their canvases to depict scenes from tribal life. Musicians wove traditional songs with contemporary beats. Filmmakers captured stories that had never been told on screen. Authors published novels and poetry that explored Native identity and experience. All of this art was a form of cultural reconstruction. It was a way of healing from the wounds of the past and building a better future. An artist said, "Art doesn't just tell, it transforms. It connects us to our roots and lets us express who we are. Our art is a celebration of our history and a vision for our future." Museums and cultural centers joined the movement too. They created exhibits that showcased Native history and culture. They gave voice to the voiceless and honored the resilience of Native peoples. School curriculums were rewritten to include Native history. At last, students learned about the contributions of their ancestors and the challenges they faced. They learned about treaties and land claims that had been ignored for generations. A teacher said, "It's time our students learn the truth about our history. It's not just about the past, it's about understanding who we are today and building a better future together." But this movement didn't happen overnight. It took years of hard work and dedication. It took the courage to speak out and the determination to keep going. It took the wisdom of elders and the energy of youth. Then came a day when everyone in the country was talking about it. Newspapers and magazines wrote about the movement. Television and radio programs featured interviews with Native leaders and scholars. People outside of Native communities started to pay attention. They learned about Native history and culture. They listened to stories that had never been heard before. A journalist said, "We have a responsibility to tell these stories and share them with the world. It's time we listen to Native voices and learn from their strength and resilience." But some people didn't like the changes. Some people didn't want Native history to be taught in schools or museums. They didn't want to hear stories that challenged the way things had always been done. They tried to stop the movement, but they couldn't. An elder said, "Our history is not a threat. It's a gift. It's a gift to our children and grandchildren, and it's a gift to all who seek to understand the true history of this land." And the movement kept growing. More and more people joined in. They demanded that Native history be included in school curriculums. They called for museums and cultural centers to showcase Native history and culture. They used their voices to amplify Native stories and demand justice. A young activist said, "This is our moment. We have a chance to change the world by sharing our history and culture. We're not just demanding a seat at the table. We're building our own table and inviting everyone to join us." The movement to reclaim Native history was more than just a moment in time. It was a transformation. It was a way of thinking, a way of living. It was a way of honoring the past and building a better future. It was a reminder that Native peoples are not a thing of the past. They are a vital part of the present and the future, As one elder said, "We are the descendants of survivors. We have endured so much, but we have never lost our identity. We have never lost our culture. We have never lost our hope for a better future." That's it for Chapter 7. Did you enjoy this video? Please let me know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe for updates on our latest videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time. This is our 5th and final chapter. Thank you for being here with us for the whole series. We've covered a lot of hard history, but this final chapter focuses on healing, remembrance, hope, and resilience. This is Chapter 8, Honoring the Journey. At places like Wounded Knee and along the Trail of Tears, ceremonies are held to honor those who died, acknowledging the pain of what happened there. Many descendants of native peoples walk the same paths their ancestors did, and in doing so, they continue their ancestors' journeys. Every step they take is also theirs. The journey of native peoples didn't end. It continues in every step, every song, every preserved memory. To honor this journey is to acknowledge the pain, celebrate the resilience, and ensure history is never silenced again. Let's begin. On the coldest days of winter, ceremonies are held at Wounded Knee. Here, more than 300 Lakota men, women, and children were massacred by U.S. soldiers in 1890. At the site of the massacre, survivors and descendants come together to honor the dead, to pray for healing, and to remember their culture. As the sun rises over the frozen prairie, people gather in a circle, their voices rising with the cold, chanting prayers in Lakota. They ask for strength and courage. Many have walked here for days, following the old trails, stopping only when their bodies and feet could walk no more. They had walked because walking makes the journey real, and making the journey real honors their ancestors. One woman walks with her children, carrying one of her babies on her back. She tells them about the massacre, about the strength of their ancestors, and about the beauty of their culture, a culture almost destroyed here. So many of their people were killed. A culture cannot survive if its adults are wiped out. When the U.S. government sent soldiers to force Native Americans onto reservations, they thought they were wiping out generations. They wanted the land, not the people. But the people survived. The culture survived. In remembering the dead and honoring the survivors, new generations are born into the culture. Walking makes the journey real. Remembering makes the journey real. Across the United States, ceremonies are held on the Trail of Tears. Descendants stop to pray at each stop along the way, at each camp, at each river crossing, at each burial ground. They pray for their ancestors and they pray for themselves. The Trail of Tears is a journey of loss. Thousands of Cherokee died during the forced move from their lands in the southeastern United States to the newly designated Indian Territory west of Arkansas. But it's also a journey of survival, of perseverance, of commitment to family and community. And it continues. Some Cherokees still walk the Trail of Tears today. Each step brings them closer to understanding what their ancestors endured. Each step brings them closer to the truth of their history. For the Cherokee and all Native peoples, the journey of uncovering their history is an ongoing one. It is the work of many generations. But beyond the Trail of Tears and Wounded Knee, Indigenous peoples all over the United States are creating new journeys. Journeys of culture, journeys of pride, and journeys of justice. What was taken from them through assimilation and forced removal is now being reclaimed. Indigenous people across the U.S. are asserting their sovereignty and fighting for their rights. This includes the right to protect their land and resources, the right to self-determination, and the right to preserve their cultures and languages. These movements are gaining international support as more people learn about and recognize the injustices faced by Native Americans. The Seminole Nation of Oklahoma has enacted language revitalization programs to teach Seminole language learners of all ages the tribe's native tongue. The White Mountain Apache tribe in Arizona has established a cultural center to preserve and promote its culture. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe in North Dakota has led the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline, protecting their land and water from environmental damage. Across the United States, cities and states are recognizing June as Indigenous Peoples Month or Indigenous Peoples Day. Several states have officially recognized tribal sovereignty. More needs to be done, but these are important steps towards acknowledgement and justice. There are other signs of hope. The Sacagawea Language and Culture School in Colville, Washington draws students from many tribes. There are currently 125 students enrolled, and 75% of them live in homes where neither parent speaks the Salish language fluently. The school offers preschool through 8th grade and teaches students both the English language and their native languages. They sing songs in their native languages. They dance in regalia that has been passed down through generations. They tell stories around a fire, keeping their traditions alive. In Montana, Chief Joseph's great-grandson, who is also named Chief Joseph, works with the Salish Kootenai College to help students find their voice. He knows that without language, a culture cannot thrive. So he works to pass on the stories and teachings of his ancestors. This is the journey of the Salish people. It is the journey of all native peoples. It is a journey that will continue for generations. In California, Chumash elder Julia Bogany teaches children the language and culture of her people. Only an estimated 1,000 Chumash speakers remain, and many of them are elderly. So it's up to the next generation to keep the language alive. Bogany believes that speaking the language is an important way to connect with ancestors. By speaking Chumash, she feels connected to her ancestors, and she hopes to pass that connection on to the children she teaches. And that is the journey of a lifetime. As Native Americans continue to walk their traditional paths, whether physically, culturally, or spiritually, they are also continuing to walk their journey for justice. Their voices are stronger than ever before. In recent years, several colleges have removed Native American mascots and symbols that were considered offensive and disrespectful. In addition, several professional sports teams have changed their names and logos to be more inclusive and respectful of Native American cultures. In 2020, the NFL's Washington team dropped its former name and logo, which was considered a slur by many Native Americans. In 2021, the MLB's Cleveland team changed its name from Indians to Guardians. These changes reflect a growing awareness and respect for Native American cultures and a commitment to creating a more inclusive and equitable society for all. And yet, despite all the progress that's been made, there's still a lot more work to do. Many Native Americans still face significant challenges, including poverty, lack of access to healthcare and education, and ongoing struggles for land rights and cultural preservation. However, the resilience and determination of Native Americans have never wavered. They continue to fight for their rights and their culture, and they continue to share their stories with the world. As more people learn about and understand the history and culture of Native Americans, we can all work together to create a better future for all. It is a future that is already here. It is here in the classes where Native languages are taught. It is here in the ceremonies that honor the dead. It is here in the dances and festivals that celebrate life. They tried to erase, but the culture bloomed. It is here in the activism and advocacy for social change. It is here in the fight for land and water protection. It is here in the pursuit of truth and reconciliation. They tried to hide the truth, but the truth bloomed. It is here in the children who are learning their native languages. It is here in the youth who are leading initiatives to address the opioid epidemic in Indian country. It is here in the elders who are sharing their knowledge and wisdom with the next generation. It is here in the heartbeat of every tribal nation. The future isn't just possible, it's already begun. From the trail of tears to wounded knee, from pain to resistance, from memory to hope. This is the journey that must never be forgotten. May it be told, shared, and honored. Because as long as memory lives, so does the future. Thank you for watching this episode and for joining us for this series. Please let us know what you learned in the comments below. See you next time.